So I'm a math person, and so are you, and we look for opportunities. If 31 million employees only recognize that 13% of their leaders effectively communicated, that means by doing nothing else besides effectively communicating, you could win and beat 87% of all the businesses out there.
Hey everyone, welcome to Crossroad Conversations with the Lewis Brothers, where we aim to share real stories about running a successful family business while working through adversity and pouring back into our community that keeps our doors open every single day. We're your hosts, Shelby, Matt, and Taylor, and we'll be bringing you real, relevant local business advice, maybe some automotive insights that are sure to change the way you look at running a business or buying a car, and maybe even throw in a plug for you to do business with us here locally.
Hey, welcome back to Crossroad Conversations with the Lewis Brothers today. Shelby and I have got a great topic that we get to dive into today. Shelby, it's on communication.
We're talking about communicating.
Communication is at the heart of everybody's business. Hey, and if we face it, we're two men sitting here. We're probably not at the top of the food chain on the best of communication.
We might just talk about, like, what not to do. I don't know.
I don't know about your wife, but mine lets me know.
There's a reason she's not in here sitting next to me, because she would tell you.
We get roasted.
Oh, Lord. But we're learning from that.
We are learning from that, and that's what we want to dive into today and let you know, based upon our hard knocks, where we have implemented better communication, how it's helped productivity, how it's helped performance, and then how it's helped profit overall. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Absolutely. Hey, and if you haven't yet, go back, and last week we talked about health in the workplace, episode 11, and we fully kind of broke down health in the workplace and how that's kind of grown and developed from Lewis Line Racing in 1981 and kind of getting the whole team involved. We talked about the thousands of pounds that the team has lost.
Yep.
Just as coming together. We talked about the gym within the dealership. We talked about some of our crazy stories and some of our fun races and not so fun races. It was a fun one to kind of break down and go through the details and how it's changed, how we do business, and all of the people of the dealership. But also, don't forget, you got to do a quick business plug. Make sure, after you listen to this whole thing, go to lewissuperstore.com and check out our inventory.
You bet.
Over 900 vehicles on the ground, special rates, special financing options. It's getting to the fourth quarter, and your tax accountant or your CPA might say, hey, you need to buy something. Sure. So go check it out there. On another side of the thing, with Crossroad Conversations with the Lewis Brothers, if you haven't yet, please leave a review wherever you listen to that on podcast or Spotify or directly on the website or wherever it is. I know there's 10 or 15 different places. Leave us a review. That helps us know what's good, what's bad, what we should change, and then it attracts other people to it.
You bet, you bet. You know, one of the things that I really like, and I'm going to pause here, about the podcast and what we're talking about on here is the things we talk about, we actually do.
Oh, no doubt. I promise we're not going to sit here and talk about, like, what if.
It's not from a book you or I have written or an article, one, we're not writers.
No.
But two, and a great example of that is last weekend. You know, last week's episode was on health in the workplace. Well, last weekend, I'll pause right here. It's not even in the notes, but we not only sponsored, we participated, helped run in the Bob big event out at Kessler Mountain.
Yeah, it was the Beast of Burden. So it was a run and or bike event. So it was 25 hours. It was just around 400 participants, I believe.
They were.
And it started Saturday at noon and it ran through Sunday. I got cut a little short due to the storms. But it was amazing. So we got to be there and set up like... When we do something, we go full speed ahead. We had so much going on. The cool thing, if you didn't notice or if you haven't noticed, we powered the entire event off of one of our Lightnings.
So let me set up what all was connected to the Lightning. Now, remember, the event itself was 25 hours. We got to be set up before, and it's got to keep going afterwards. Yeah. So all the audio, and when we talk about audio, it's not one speaker. So we had 9 different PA speakers.
Powered PA speakers,
subs, all the watts, all the amps. We had all the lighting for the entire base camp for everything.
It was over 7,000 LED Christmas lights.
Over 7,000 LED Christmas lights, the entire timing equipment, all the computers that ran it.
Which was about 10 timing computers to be able to show results and what was going on.
All the TVs connected there, the arches connected.
The fog machine.
There was strobe lights.
10 strobe lights.
The list goes on and on. Let me tell you this. We used every single plug-in port in both the frunk and in the bed of this Lightning. So I'm going to say it was 28 to 30 hours complete of time it was hooked up all out. And when you got in the truck to drive it home, what was your percentage left?
It still had 61% left.
61%. That's a testament to the Lightning and its capabilities. But back on the Beast of Burden itself, we had a great time running it. We got to MC some.
Yeah, we brought the thunder with some music and getting people wound up in the middle of the night. And
I know.
It was just a dang good event. It was a lot of fun. It was.
We had a team as well, so they went out there and ran. Hey, we got Dad out there.
Oh, yeah.
Dad ran a 4.5-mile loop.
We had the kids out there. The boys were out some loops.
I know it. So it was a lot of fun. We had some people from work there that had never ran before.
Had some first-time runners. We're still working on that. We talked about health in the workplace, so we kind of got to do it all. We got to be the title sponsor, but we also got to drag some people out and have fun.
I just wanted to put that as an example out there. The guys, what you hear us talking about, we actually do. We'd love to have a conversation with you about how we've integrated that in and how it's not improved ourselves, but also our business as well. But today we got to talk about what we drive up here. Today we're talking about the Bronco. And not only the Bronco Badlands.
Bronco Badlands is one of the tried and true. If you know a Jeep, it's a Rubicon. If it's a Bronco, it's a Badlands. It gets front and rear locking differentials, can be Sasquatch or non-Sasquatch, which means more capable, factory 35-inch tire. The Bronco, when released in 2020, it was one of the highest reservation rate vehicles. The sales rates have been through the roof. But now we're talking about Bronco of all its capability, 2-door or 4-door, hardtop, soft top, big motor, 2.7. But now, because it's year-end and because supply and demand is caught up, we're talking about savings. So up to $7,500 off. That includes $2,000 Jeep Conquest. They're after the Jeep.
Wow. They are, aren't they?
Yeah, they're after the Jeep. So $7,500 off Broncos, and we got a bunch to pick from.
Hey, I'll tell you a couple of the features that I really like about the Bronco Badlands. It is the ease of the off-road capability. And I don't necessarily mean the drivability and the suspension, but I'm talking about here is the locker and the sway bar disconnect.
Yeah, the switches, the hero switches.
The switches are fantastic. And here's what I say, in the Jeep people will relate out there. When we get to the sway bar disconnect, you don't have to be on perfectly flat ground. You can hit the button and it disconnects even under load.
Because it's hydraulic, which is a big deal.
That is a big deal.
When we went to the Bronco off-rodeo, they showed us that under load, because that's always a tricky thing, right? That you could disconnect that and reconnect it under load.
That was a big one. The other one, also the trail turn assist. Now, this one took me back to my off-roading days of the cutting brakes.
Yeah.
Which originally came from the dune buggies, but we had back in the old 75 Bronco we had built to off-road, is the trail turn assist. So when you come up on the trail, you can hit that sucker, and it locks up that inside back brake.
Yeah.
And your turning radius, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's at least cut in half.
It allows you to turn a whole lot easier.
It does.
To get around obstacles. So that's a feature that's built in. It's up on the hero switch. You push the button in at a certain degree turned on the steering wheel. It locks up and takes you around. So that these things are loaded full, and they are very capable off-road machines, and they drive dang good down the road.
Man, hey, and on top, like you said, the end-of-the-year incentives on that. So we had to put a little plug there. We had to tell you about what we did this past weekend out in the woods on Mount Kessler. But now let's get into what you tuned in for, and it's effective communication in the workplace. Let me set the stage a little bit. This is from Forbes, and they did this back in June of 2024. They said ineffective workplace communication cost U.S. businesses, get ready for this, $1.2 trillion. That's with a T. It cost them $1.2 trillion annually because they weren't effectively communicating.
Just communicating. Just communicating. Or goals or whatever.
Now check out this report by Forbes as well. They surveyed, now I'm giving you guys the numbers here so you're not like, they surveyed 10 people. It's got to be a flawed survey. They surveyed 31 million employees. That's a pretty good sample size.
I'd say it's a good sample.
31 million employees, only 13% of their leaders practice effective workplace communication. So I'm a math person, and so are you, and we look for opportunities. If 31 million employees only recognize that 13% of their leaders effectively communicated, that means by doing nothing else besides effectively communicating, you could win and beat 87% of all the businesses out there.
That's where you get to take a statistic and say, let me show you how to win.
Yep.
Don't do anything else. Don't start a new service.
Yep.
Don't offer something more. Take what you have and be better than everyone else at it.
That's a really important point, and you and I have talked about this before because we've been guilty of this, is you get into the day-to-day hustle and bustle, especially in a small business where you might be doing a little HR, you might be taking out the trash.
Just doing it all.
You're trying to problem solve, you're doing it all. And then you're going, well, where else do we need to advertise? What else do we need to buy? Do we need to buy a new system, some new software? And then something comes out like this that you don't have to invest any money into. Yeah. And you go, well, dang, I could beat 87% of the businesses out there, but just by doing a better job communicating with my employees.
Yeah.
So when you think about that we talk about that, hey, you can beat 87% by just communicating, and that $1.2 trillion was lost last year by ineffective communicating, then it is a perfect opportunity and a great platform for us to talk about it today. So when we start talking about that, I want to talk about communication with your employees about what you want to accomplish. Now, before we get into the message and how to tell employees what we want them to accomplish and what page we're on, I want to make sure that everybody does not confuse that with brainstorming.
Yeah,
Okay?
two different things.
Two different things, and two different group of people, too.
Yes.
You're not having a company-wide meeting on brainstorming on how we should fix this.
No, and you like, and I'll that's a great segue, and we didn't even talk about that, but and I'll show you how you understand who's in what meeting. You know, your doers, your thinkers, your implementers, there's different people.
There is different people, and it's not by job title.
No. It's their personality. And so years ago, I was in a 20-group meeting. I think this was probably like 6 years ago. And we were talking about hiring, firing, how to build employee morale and understand each person. And this guy told me that was from a large group. And he said, hey, and I think we've talked about this before, but he said, what I do when I hire or I'm trying to work and develop a person is I'll give them a predictive index test.
Okay.
And they call them a bunch of different things, but it's a personality trait. And I remember when I first started working at Lowe's, they made me take one of those. So before they even got to know me, they knew what I was and what I was naturally programmed to do. So I told the guy, I said, Jeff, send me that test. And so I took the test and he sent it to me. He said, hey, when you read this, you need to understand it is what it is, and it's what you're naturally programmed to. And the other things that you're not, you're going to have to work harder on. And so I remember reading that, and I kind of laughed, but then, because I laughed, and it was like, this thing knows exactly what I am, and I never really been called out on exactly what I am. And one of the first things it said is be very careful of managing people because you will expect an extremely high level of productivity without properly communicating your expectations to them. Like that said that to a T. I told my wife when I got home from the meeting, I was like, hey, I figured it out. I'm not naturally programmed to communicate. And on top of that, I expect a crazy high level. One of our first podcasts, we talked about if you can get your team to do 70%, you're winning of what you can do. But understand that, so I had to work really hard to make sure, because I can do it myself.
Sure.
We're talking about
But then you're at capacity.
Yeah, so talking about communicating. And so, it says here, if you can just properly communicate. So if we can take our current business and communicate. So then in those rooms, we realized there was doers. They're not the thinkers.
Yeah. So you got doers and you got thinkers. So once you come up with whatever you want to communicate, if you got a new process or if it's X, Y, and Z, you also need, depending upon your organization size, and we've really had to learn this because we're now over 260 employees. So if just you or I say something, it was kind of an announcement, but it doesn't necessarily get put in place. So we have to have a core group. Okay, this is not the brainstormers. We have to have a core group of what we call catalysts.
Yeah.
And those catalysts, we introduce them the subject, whatever we're talking about, okay? A new process on how we're going to check people into service or how we're going to handle bad reviews or how we're going to handle X, Y, and Z. And that core group then locks arms. So then once you or I go over to a meeting or an email or a memo or whatever it is, and everybody starts chatting about it, we've got that core group that backs us up and can help translate any misconceptions.
Correct.
So that's the first point is once you've already developed what you're going to talk about, okay, then you have your core group that can help you implement and back you on it.
Now, we'll tell you something that we've learned as well. If you can make your idea their idea,
So much better.
You can 10x. So what? Now, don't get confused of doers and thinkers, right? Because then we'll have a thinkers meeting. But in your doers meeting, like you just said with the catalyst, we might have individually went around and asked service, sales, parts, purchased, vehicle check-in, mobile service. We might have asked questions, and we might have introduced a little, not brainwashing, but of like, we've done the research and we know what works and what doesn't work. You know where you want to go to dinner, right? This is basic and classic. Like, I'm not going to say, hey, where do you want to go to dinner? I'm going to say, hey, I'm thinking about taking everybody out for dinner tonight. Do you want to go to Colton's or do you want to go to Texas Roadhouse? You know that either one of those you're happy with, right? So you go around to the team, you've done research. I mean, it's not my way or the highway, but you've done research and you know, based on facts, here's what works. And so your catalyst, you help them help you make the decision. So then when you have that team meeting, they're like, I had part in that. And so they do. They'll give us facts like, hey, whoa, what if you did it like this? Like, hey, that's a good idea. Let's go back to the drawing board.
Absolutely.
But then when they hear in the workplace, like, no, they said that we were supposed to wash the cars and then work on them. And they're like, well, yeah, let me tell you why. Because they were part of that decision making and then of the launch of that, and it will 10x if you can make your idea and their idea.
That's a great point. And one of the common themes that you'll hear, and if you go back and listen to the other episodes, you just hear it. It's like a broken record that we talk about listening, listening, and listening. If you go into that meeting and, like Shelby said, you know what you want the team to do. You know the right answer. But you got to take a little bit extra time that'll give you the multiplication factor to get their buy-in and where it's their idea. And you just ask questions and you listen, and then you just kind of lead the team, the core group, to where you're wanting to go, and then everybody's on board, they're ready to rock.
Yeah.
You got to tell your brain to shut up when it's like you don't have enough time. You're too busy. Just tell them what to do. We could say that all day long. I mean, I'm telling you, you look at our schedule and what we got going on. We have a lot going on. But we know that it's worth investing an extra 5 or 10 minutes to get their buy-in because of the multiplication factor.
And we've learned it the hard way. We've so many times like, hey, here's the game plan, here's what we came up, and we've spent all night working on this perfect game plan and perfect presentation, and because they had nothing to it, they were in the back texting, or maybe we took their phone or said turn it off. They still were not 100% bought in. But if you can, like, no one has seen so many red slug bugs.
Oh, yeah.
Or red Volkswagen Beetles, if you don't know what a slug bug is, until you own one, and then you're like, oh, whoa, there was no one, right? That's selective choice, and I don't know the correct term, but in hillbillyism, that's selective choice vision that you can see something. And so if we, in Discover, I'm like, hey, Matt, what about this, this, and this? Do you think we should pick up the customer's vehicle and then deliver it? Or should we take the customers that are already in service and offer a delivery? And so, like, we should do this and this. So then we're delivering the new game plan.
Yes.
They're like, oh, that was my idea.
That's right.
And it really wasn't.
No.
And they might have brought a good point. But then they're like, oh, yeah, that was my idea to get a red slug bug, right? This is such a great car. And so you can help them with that. Then they will, no joke, they will fully be a part and they will fully help you push the idea of how to win.
Well, let me challenge you on this because our listeners need to understand something right here, because part of a type A personality for all the business leaders out there is you got to have some type of ego. And nothing's wrong with an ego as long as you keep it in check. All right? So if you've got this core group and you're getting them to buy into your idea, and then you hear them later after you announce it, tell the employees, hey, this was my idea, so on and so forth. Do you shut them down and say, no, that was my idea?
No, I might tell you, like, hey, guess what, Matt? It's working.
Yes.
It's like, you're not going to believe this, but we were talking, and I'm going to use a random name, Terry. He was so excited. He told the team this was his idea, and this is why we're so successful. But newsflash, check your ego at the door, baby. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't want my name on a plaque. Don't put me under the 40, under 40. Don't put me on it. I just want to be able to show you how I win with being able to show other people. Like this weekend during the race, it's like, I want to go out, and I'm not coming back and getting over my stats and all the things. It's like, hey, slap them on the butt, tell them where the shortcuts are and where to push hard, and then in the end we get to win. But no, I'm never going to take the air out of their sail and say, no, that was my idea that I gave to you, and that's why you're winning. Don't do that because your 10X you just created, I
what's
just
a negative
squashed them.
10X?
Yeah, and now they're like, well, that's stupid.
So you got an option there when you know that it was your idea. Your ego and the credibility needs to come from, man, I did a good job selling it hard enough that then it became their idea. And instead of shutting them down and going, hey, listen, Terry, that was my idea. It's like, man, Terry, that was a great idea you had.
I don't know how you do it.
Any way I can help you implement that or support you on it? Because the goal is that the team is beating to the same drum as you. And we've talked about this part before, but I'm going to tell you again. Every single business out there, there is always, always, always a meeting after the meeting.
Yeah.
The meeting after the meeting is to dissect and put credibility to the main meeting you just had. And that happens from your core group, and everybody knows who that is, and all your employees go to them and say, hey, what'd you think about what they went over? Do you think that's going to last? Do you think they're actually going to do that? You have to win at the meeting after the meeting.
So to break that down for you to understand that, whether you think it's happening or not, it is. Whether it's a side text, or it's actual conversation, or it's walking into the parking lot, at the end of the day, here's how you win at the meeting after the meeting. Because it will happen. Don't try to stop it, because it's probably pretty relevant, because they're not always going to bring you as a leader all the problems.
Correct.
They're going to go to the whoever that may be. You need to go to the people that are going to host the meeting before your meeting and say, hey, here's what I'm about to bring to the team. I just wanted your input.
Absolutely.
And then once again, you're making your idea their idea. So when they have the post-meeting, the meeting after the meeting, they're like, yeah, that was one of my ideas, and here's how we're going to implement it, right? And otherwise, it's just you've wasted your time and your effort, and they're going to do what they want to do. And then you have to micromanage it.
An idea or a policy or the announcement without buy-in, it just has no legs. It could be a great speech. It could be a great rah, but you need it to have legs if we're communicating in the workplace. So that's really important as we start dissecting now on the ways that we've challenged ourselves to be better communicators. We're talking about with our employees first to be able to put in things for better CSI, better sales, a better experience, so on and so forth. You have to make sure that you get the buy-in and the whole team is on the same page. So we'll next get into what we use in our business, some of those tools, and then some examples there. Before we get into that, it's Automotive Fun Fact Quiz of the Week.
All right,
Here we go. Which car maker developed the first modern three-point seatbelt? Now, you know what that was for, so Mom didn't have to with her arm. You know what I mean? When you came up to the stoplight?
Yeah.
If that was the 3-point.
So if you're not watching, that's an arm straight across your face or your chest. That's what happened, right? When someone stopped in front of you and you weren't paying attention. So what's our options?
So our options are Ford, Lexus, BMW, or Volvo.
We're talking about the first modern 3-point seatbelt. Now, is that the one that was the retractor like in the Fiesta that's like...
Could have been EXP. The EXP had it too. Remember when you shut the door and it's like...
Yeah, the LeBaron had it.
I'm not sure. I would say 3-point that it has to continuously connect.
Okay, 3 points contact.
We'll come back to the
answer.
answer.
We're going to come back to that. So next we're talking about how to properly communicate. And I can't go any further without saying it's so important that within your business and in your workforce that you communicate. And that creates habit of communicating with the customer. And so any and every complaint that we get, I assure you, I would bet the house on it, that the complaint somewhere along the way said, I just wish that they would have communicated more with me. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So if you're not communicating with your team, you're losing out on $1.3 trillion in revenue because you didn't teach them how to communicate with each other, then to communicate with the customer. Because if you're sitting there, if you're constantly saying, hey, Terry, communicate. Hey, Terry, you need to communicate. Hey, I know the part's back ordered. You just need to call them this morning and say, hey, Mrs. Smith, it's Terry, Lewis Ford. Just want to let you know I checked. Your brake pads still aren't in. They're still on back order. I did check with Downtown Parts, and I did check with this, and I just wanted to let you know. Right? That's not a phone call that you like to have, but it's better you calling them than Mrs. Smith calling saying, hey, Terry, any update? Where's my brakes? Right? If I can head that off, then you can be better off. So we're talking about performance communicating, so communicating to help employees perform well and increase their job satisfaction.
So just saying the word communicating, that's just an idea.
Yeah.
And an idea without a game plan and without implementation has no traction.
It's worthless.
It's absolutely worthless. So no different than you talking about, let's say, a service advisor saying, hey, you got to better communicate, you got to better communicate. That's no different than trying to teach your kid how to swim and just say, hey, you got to learn how to swim, you got to get in the pool, you got to learn how to swim, you got to learn how to swim.
That's the idea.
That's the idea. So now we got to talk about, like, how do you actually take the idea, put the game plan in place? Here are some of the things that we've really learned on doing it. And these are very simple. Again, our podcast is about simple things that you can do. You don't have to have a doctorate degree to be able to put these in place. Once we've scaled up, and this is something I've had to learn, where I used to be able to walk around and communicate verbally with everybody. That's just not sustainable at 260 employees to be able to effectively do that. So a lot of times that does come out with email.
Yeah.
For example, that email will go out to different groups. Now that is really an announcement, or that's a reflection. That's not much collaboration.
No.
That's, hey, this is going to go on. And even the email will come out for a meeting that we're going to have about whatever's going on.
Communication about what's to come. And here's what we're going to cover. So it kind of gets the idea flowing.
It does.
Right?
It does. And any of these things we talk about, it's multi-layered. There's not a one light switch.
There's not a one and done.
We already talked about you got to have your core group for the meeting after the meeting. We got to get people
to the meeting.
So that'll come email-wise. We go through the meeting, which we'll get to those details in a minute. And then a lot of times then we recap it.
It's important because there's a learning pyramid, and Matt's pointed this out to teams and across the thing. But if you just hear something or see something, it was 5% that they retain.
Yeah.
So if you're only just communicating it via one way, it's 5%, which is not. I don't like those odds. Right?
I know.
I want to figure out the other 95. So what we will do, let's say we need to get a new idea or a process, or let's say they just added $2,000 to the Bronco for Conquest for Jeep, right? So we could just go to the graphics team and say, hey, David, create me a graphic, right? And which is necessary, right? We need to tell the world on our busiest day, there's always more people outside the store. So we'll create that graphic. And so we could just email that out, right? Or we could just print it and put it on the windows or the walls of the dealership.
We could.
Right?
We could.
But then we understand. So we're going to say, hey, in our sales meeting, we're going to go over this. So then we talk about it. Put a visual up on the projector, on the screen, on the TVs. Then we give a handout.
Paper copy.
We're increasing the odds. It's the frequency. It's the same way if I constantly say a person's name. Otherwise, I'm going to forget it. But then we give them the digital graphic, and then we remind them about the graphic. And then we say, hey, on Saturday morning, I want you to grab that vehicle, and we're going to do a walk around on it.
Yep.
So now they have buy-in. So now they've seen that at 5 or 6 or 7 different levels, we're increasing the odds of that actually, whether it's a new process or it's a sales spiff or it's how to handle a customer and process, we're going to handle it from all angles so that it becomes part of their new routine.
That's correct. And the one part that Shelby's talking about here, we can put in multiple layers, but we do this on a weekly basis on the vehicles that are specials that we pick out. So what Shelby talks about there is, hey, email comes out, hey, meeting this Friday, starts at 9:15 in the conference room. What we go over there is it's on the projector screen. So the digital part is on the projector screen. The managers have to pass out a hard paper copy to everybody.
Yeah.
Managers individually have to get up and talk about it and explain it. And then within our communication tool, which we use Slack, we have different channels that then have the digital versions and the cutouts for everybody to be able to use.
Yeah.
So when you start thinking about that, they hear about it because somebody's teaching it. They visually see it because it's on the screen. They have a tangible product, the handout, the paper part, and then they have an evergreen part that is already fancy and ready for them to use within Slack.
Yeah. So
we're talking about hitting from 4 different angles there, which increases from just standing up in front of the room and just retaining 5% of it.
Yeah.
5% of it. So that's just one of the examples on how we communicate when we have specials out there. And then Saturday, we're coming back around, and when we go through our Saturday sales meeting, which if you've not joined before, go on any of our Facebook pages, and it's on there live every Saturday morning. You'll see what we're talking about. Then we go over it in person, and that's called a demonstration.
Yeah.
That's called a demonstration. And we didn't just make this up. Shelby talked about the learning pyramid. And look it up, Google Learning Pyramid. It'll show you at the very top is 5% that you talked about. Reading gets you 10%.
Okay, so that's our printout.
That's the printout. Okay. The audio visual, which we love in the conference room, that's 20%. So now we've gone from 5% to 20% by just having a handout and just by verbally going over it.
Just by not just sending an email.
And then when we do the demonstration on Saturday,
hands-on, show and go,
that moves to 30%.
Okay.
So let's do some quick math there. The majority of people just give a lecture or an announcement about something. They're in the 5% category.
So we can 6 times that?
6x that.
Okay.
You know what most people, where they stumble, they say, hey, you just sound like a broken record. You keep going over the same thing. But that's not true. And you and I have learned this from the radio and some other people talking, is that only 5% got that.
Yeah.
Yet if you ask the person doing the announcement or teaching the class, they always say this, man, I killed it. They really got it this time. You know why? Because when you look at the very bottom of the learning period, 90% get it when they're teaching others.
Yes. So when you're up there speaking, teaching, you're like, you got it. Like, it's not about you getting it, right? We can't implement anymore because we need to teach others how to implement. So within your business, understand that there are multiple layers. It's not just a flyer. You know, like the last week we had Halloween at the store. And so we always have fun. Everyone dresses up. And it is not just an email, I assure you. Because it would happen, we have to break down some walls because we don't require, but it's pretty much like an unwritten rule that you better wear a costume.
Sure.
It's not because we love this or love that. It's just about having fun. If you've heard about our culture and our atmosphere. So it came out, here's an email. Hey, here's what Thursday looks like. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to potluck.
Yep.
As much as we don't love the potluck and all this stuff, but bring it in. I'm not going to judge you today on what you eat. Tomorrow I will, but today I won't. And then we put up the signs, posted, hey, sign up for the potluck. But then it took the in-person of, hey, what are you bringing? What are you wearing? And then it was a circle back around, and then in our meetings we had a digital flyer that said, hey, make sure you sign up. Here's what's going on. Let me give you a quick inside trader tip. Anything is worth having. Anything that's worth having is not easy to get.
That's correct. And then even the day of, when we were going around, because we went around to each of the stores, you know, because we were inspecting what we expected.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? That the culture, we were protecting our culture there. And so then the text messages start flying to those department heads or to those general managers is, hey, we're 5 minutes out, we're 10 minutes out. So when you start looking at the layers of just making sure we had everything for Halloween, like if we're going to do it, we might as well do it, you know. The announcement came out multiple weeks ahead. Here's what's going on. Then close to it, another email came out. Then the flyers, then the digital, then the text message, then the verbal and the meetings. All those things led up to a high success rate.
At a huge, you know, the culture's great, and there were some people that had not been there. They kind of thought we were Happy Gilmore 9-3-9, and I'm like, hey, are you sure I'm supposed to wear something? And they're like, oh, absolutely. Let me show you photos. Let me show you proof that we do that, and that's what we expect. It's no different than the car wash stickers I talked about a couple episodes ago. That allowed us to inspect what we expect and realize the communication was there. And so then we talk about communication within the business. Hopefully you understand that now. And then it translates to the customers. That's no different than it is internally, but we realize we have to communicate on the channel and the way that they want to be communicated to.
And we all need to be communicating the same message. That's really important. And you've heard us talk about our marketing before, 360 degrees. That's why when you see in our Slack app that we use, we have a marketing channel that's in there. You know, we've got a guy dedicated, David, who puts all of our marketing material in there, and then people can individually grab it and share it social media wise. You know, they can text it, they can co-video it, they can email it. So then we have everybody not talking about different messages, but the same message. And when you do that, it becomes more effective.
And so that's how you transact and translate with it.
Exactly.
That's how it makes sense. And we've learned, like within service, like that's our largest level of communication growth opportunity, because that's where our frequency of customers is the highest, is in service. And so we've beat our heads on the wall trying to figure that out to communicate most properly. But also we talked about previously about giving time back to service advisors. So one of our thing is text messages. So we have a system that's not AI driven. It is AI organized, but it is still human to human. But we send over 14,000, send and receive 14,000 text messages per month between our employees and the customers just to try to keep them within a loop. Because we realize not everyone wanted a phone call, but they still want to be communicated to. So that's something that we've learned to be able to effectively communicate. And then it gives you an opportunity, hey, if you don't want to text, just give us a quick call and here's how it is. But in the meantime, here's what's going on. Here's what we've ordered. Here's our options for you.
Sure.
Just to be able to properly communicate, give time back to the employees,
Sure,
but also give the customers what they need and want.
One of the important pieces of this communication is to figure out the best method.
Yeah.
And that changes. I'm going to talk about the customer side, and then we'll flip back internally. The customer side, for example, in service, one of the questions that it happens in our write-up process is, what's your preferred method of communication?
Yeah.
And it's not about what my favorite is or what your favorite is. It's that customer. Do they prefer an email? Do they prefer a text? Do they prefer a video?
Yeah.
You know, we get into videos all the time of, you know, there's over 30,000 students at the U of A.
Yeah.
And parents could be in New Hampshire or Maryland or Texas or wherever. A video helps out build confidence and trust, and that know you, like you, trust me.
Yeah.
So we've got to figure out, the customer doesn't have to adapt to what we like. We need to adapt to what the customer wants. They're the ones paying the bills. And everybody forgets that.
We've learned that in being moldable or adaptable. It's no different than a quarterback, because we have to, you know, we talked about systems and processes, and here's how you process a customer, whether it be in service or in sales. But I can tell you many of times that I don't know a person's phone number, and I've sold them a car via Instagram Messenger, via Facebook Messenger, because that was their level of how they translated. They wouldn't even, you know, if my handle wasn't my name, they wouldn't even know my name. It was just based on frequency of posting. They were like, hey, that looks like fun. Looks like they have a good offer or a good vehicle, or they have no appointments for oil changes. You just show up and we'll get it done. And so then that whole translates through Instagram Messenger is like, hey, what's their name? Like, I haven't got that yet. Just because they needed something and I said I can do it, right? Or what's their phone number? Like, oh, here's their Instagram handle. I'll get you the rest of it. But adapting to the situation, not saying, no, I need you to call me. Like, that might not be comfortable for them.
Might not be.
The communication can be different, right?
Because if the end goal is to convert them to an appointment or a sale, whether it's sales or service, however they want to communicate that way.
Yeah.
You know, just be ready to adapt.
Yeah.
Be ready to adapt. That's so important with the customer. Same thing with employees is, now I don't ask every single employee, because there's some of that of like, here's our process.
Yes.
But if we hit a roadblock, like the other day we were meeting with our office and our finance team. We were talking about communication. And this has changed a couple times. Because, you know, the office is working up deals, working up checks, paying bills, paying employees, so on and so forth. So that's their role during the day. They might have a question for a manager, but a service manager or a sales manager, they may not be able to answer the phone right then because they may be in front of a customer.
Yeah.
So it's what's the most effective way to communicate with them. And we identified that, hey, it was email. Yeah. Because they could attach the attachments, the document, the invoice they were talking about. But then it got to where they were getting too many emails.
Yes.
So then the effectiveness of the email just got thrown out the window, because then somebody's like, well, I get 45 emails from them a day.
It was just watered down.
So we adjusted that.
Yeah.
And we said, hey, let's just do a daily recap email that then has all the to-do stuff in there, and a manager can do it at 9 o'clock at night or 9 in the morning or whenever it may be.
Yeah.
Let's combine all those emails to just one or two that are more effective.
And that only came by getting all the necessary people, the necessary doers.
Yes.
They had their feedback from their departments, and we said, okay, here's what we're doing. Here's what we've tried to do. Here's where we're trying to get is clean paperwork, timely paperwork. Everyone paid who needs to be paid. And this isn't working. So what's your idea? What's your idea? Okay, how do we marry the two to make that efficient, that they can get an answer back quickly, but they're also not having to get up from their seat, walk to the other building and say, I'm just going to stand in front of you.
Absolutely.
You know, so we're just learning to adapt. And like, once again, don't get your ego hung up and say, no, I said, because sometimes you want to do that.
Oh,
it's
you
like,
do.
With my kids, I'm like, no. But then I have to stop and think like, look, if I don't teach my kids, you know, and teachers are great. Like, they teach them all of the things they need to know in school, but there's a whole lot of life lessons and skills that if you don't stop and teach them, you know, and they'll say why, or they say mom 1,000 times.
Oh, yeah.
But if you don't stop and say, hey, here's why we were going this direction, do you see a more efficient manner to do this? And like, oh, yeah, it's right over here. Like, why didn't you do it like that? Okay, let's give that a whirl. Like, let's throw darts at that. So that's understanding to be adaptable and not just get your ego hung up and say, no, my name's on the building, do it this way.
That's a very important part, and we'll use that example when we were talking to the office and we were talking to finance, and this was multiple meetings. They didn't have to be 3-hour meetings. They were 15, 30-minute meetings.
Yeah.
And a recap meeting once we had the process, it was longer.
Yeah.
But one side would say, hey, I'd like to communicate this way. Now, before we grabbed that ball and ran with it, it's our job to moderate that and direct the ship.
Yes.
We don't have to talk the whole time. We would go to the other side and be like, hey, what do you think about this? Is that the most effective and most efficient way for you to do it, or do you have a different idea? Sometimes they'd have a different idea, then we'd volley it back, and we'd keep peeling back these layers until everybody goes, yeah, that's acceptable, that's the best route. And then we would ask one more time, are you positive? Is that exactly how you want to be able to go forward? Do you think that this is the best option? So then when they walked away and they got frustrated one day, they had buy-in that you were talking about earlier. It was their idea.
And that's important, and we've talked about it for a while, but that's so important because most of the time, whether it be finance or the office, they thought everything was going well because they weren't getting the interaction from the other side. And so then we as middlemen we got it from both sides.
We did.
Finance is like, God, the office is not listening, and they're doing this and this. And the office is like, can you help us with finance? They're not listening. They're doing this in the process, and that's been over silly things. And it's been over just trying to implement. But don't just throw it out the window. Like, it's necessary. Like, sit down, take the time, break it down, communicate.
Yes.
And then, like, hey, can we be honest? Like, we're not all getting along. Like, this is not, and this shouldn't be this difficult. And then when it's their idea, then when it gets tough, they tell their employees, no, this was the idea I came up with. Let's make it work.
The other point, too, and I talk about this, and I don't know when I got this, I was on a tech phone call with somebody about, I don't know, my internet or whatever it may be. And I tell my employees this, when we get to that certain point, and everybody knows out there what I'm talking about, is when everybody's about to boil and it's getting ready to go down. You know what I mean? It's an explosion. We talk about, all right, it's time to reset. And what do they tell you sometimes when you got to reset your modem? Unplug it. All right. Wait 15 seconds and plug it back in. I'm not really even sure what the 15 seconds does, but I tell employees that too. I'm like, hey, you got to grab the cord, yank it out of the wall. Yeah. Don't throw the device in the trash. Count to 15 or 20 and then plug it back in. Because especially if you get internally where you've got some controversy going on and things aren't going right, you have to be able to reset everybody to give them a fighting chance.
That's really important. So don't make decisions under fire, right? Like under just anger. That's not good. Now the conversation needs to be had, but you don't need to do it when you're angry or mad or just like all the feels, all the emotions. Like go jump in the cold plunge.
Yes,
I promise you'll forget about what you were mad about.
That's right.
And then let's have a conversation.
That's so important. Now, one of the other tools I'm going to throw out there, and some of these are very basic, but some of y'all aren't using them, even though they're basic and they don't cost anything.
Yeah, you're only getting 5%.
The calendar that's in your phone, hey, calendar your stuff and put it invites, not so just you know about it, so everybody else knows about it. That
is so important. My wife is complete opposite of me, and I think that's why husband and wives generally jive, is because they're two different personalities, because they were both the same. It would be full competition, full the time. My wife likes to write everything down, like on a sheet of paper, and I'm like, what if the cat tears that up, or these kids do something with it? I'm like, or I'm at work 99.76% of my life. How do I know this stuff? It's like, can you help me by putting this in the calendar? And so 6 years ago, when I learned that about myself, I was like, I have to communicate more and more and more. And I still fail at that. I failed this weekend at that, of communicating things. But I have to, at that time, I put it in my calendar, I hit invite, I add my wife if that's a relevant person, I add the managers if that's a relevant thing, and then I can see, did they accept it or decline it? So then I can go around to them like, hey, Matt, did you check your schedule? Are you good for that 2 o'clock? Yes. I noticed that, did you get that email? And so then I can inspect what I expect, and then it's proper communication. So at 2 o'clock, I'm like, hey, where you at? You accepted this, you'll be there. But it is so important, because otherwise we're just bobbing along only getting 5%. We talked about we're missing out on the $1.3 trillion.
I have gotten so frustrated over the years, and then the fingers end up pointing back at me when I have verbally gone over when we're going to have a meeting.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, everybody, next Tuesday at 11 o'clock, we're all meeting.
Yeah.
Everybody got it? Everybody good? Any conflicts? They're like, nope, we're good, boss.
I'm
we'll
good.
be there.
Yeah.
And then we look up next Tuesday at 11 o'clock, and there's 2 of 30 people that are supposed to be in there.
Yeah, it's you and me.
And then I'm texting, and we're calling, and when I'm getting frustrated, I'm like, okay, something about the system's not working. Then we started calendaring those events.
Yeah.
Do we use this device right here?
Yeah.
It does the reminding for us. And our show rate and people that are there has gone through the roof.
Yep.
Just because we used a different system.
Yep.
So you always have to look at it. Yeah, could I answer the question? Did I go over it really clear? Yes, I did.
It didn't get the rubber to the road,
It
though.
did not. Right then it did. But we all forget. We're all human.
Oh, yeah.
And everything's going to be thrown at us. So if they don't have it written down, if it's not in a calendar, and if they're not being reminded, it won't happen. So use that calendaring as well.
Yeah.
So far we've gone over, hey, we use email. We use Slack, which is a great communication tool. We use that. We use the free program.
Free 99. We've been on that thing, and we use it to full, like, every car we're traded for, it comes across.
All different. Now, make sure when you set that up, put your different channels of communication over there so it doesn't just get lost. We use email. We use Slack. We use calendaring through the phone. Nothing fancy. It's the free stuff that's already on there.
It's in a presentation of a meeting.
Yep.
It's visual.
Yep. We use handouts.
Yep.
So paper handouts that go out, the audio visual. We have other people talk about it besides us.
Yes.
We have buy-in from other groups. I think the point on, and we could go on and on with tools we use, but the common theme between all of that is it's not just one, and you have to have buy-in from others so that when the meeting after the meeting happens, the rubber hits the road.
Yeah, I think that's the whole idea. All right, before we run this thing off the tracks about communication, automatic fun fact of the week, the quiz, we talked about the 3-point seatbelt. Was it Ford? Was it Lexus? Was it BMW? Was it Volvo? So the first car maker that developed the first modern 3-point seatbelt was Volvo.
Volvo.
Oh,
I guess when you think about that, they're known for safety,
yeah.
you know? So
They were
what
coming out.
EXP was it?
It was not your EXP. Not at all. It was Volvo. I don't know when that was, but it was early on and they were the first.
All
So
right.
last piece here.
Okay.
How do we make communication profitable?
When you peel back the layers, the better job you do communicating, you can increase sales and you can decrease expenses.
Yeah.
And we won't get really deep here, but just when you think about it, communication with a customer, the more effectively we communicate with a customer in service, for example, about what their vehicle needs or about what options they have to repair their vehicle, the yes rate goes up.
Yeah.
It goes up. The better job we do communicating about when their vehicle doesn't need anything, throw a multi-point inspection.
Yeah.
Hey, you're in the green, and what I'm talking about in the green is your brakes or your tires, your wear and tear items. And then, hey, you're in the yellow, we got to start thinking about this. Then when I tell them they need something, I've been effectively communicating and preparing them for that day.
Correct. And so it's just full transparency. It's with our alignment check.
Yes.
It's with our multi-point inspection.
Yeah.
And so then like, yeah, you've been telling me that for a while.
Same thing with the communication. One of the areas, if we use video and pictures, it's really tough to argue if you send them a picture of their dirty air filter.
Yes.
Like, hey, just to let you know, complimentary-wise, we checked your air filter. Here's a picture of it.
Yeah.
Here are my options.
Yeah.
So I better communicated, and it's not like, does it really need an air filter?
Yeah, and I'm glad you pointed that out. We talked about it before, but options.
Yes.
Communication of options. So whether you're needing a new car because of an issue or you want to upgrade, or a vehicle in service that has issue, or you're ordering parts or whatever it may be, we do our very best to make sure that we communicate options to you.
That's really important. So those are a couple examples on how it increases.
Yeah.
Okay, sales, which could help profit. But the other part out there is expense. For every dollar of expense that you save, a dollar goes to the bottom line.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about when we don't effectively communicate how it hurts our expense. One of the things you could think about there, when you have a product increase in price, okay, let's say it's from the manufacturer or your distributor, an increase in price, but you don't update your computer system or your catalog, and then your employees are still selling it from the previous cost.
Yes.
What's that do to your profit?
It takes it down. It's just a direct reflection. So let's talk about, we love accessorizing.
Sure.
So generally most vehicles will, and this is a little bit of a preference thing, but we've seen the rubber to the road, is customers like tinted windows.
Yeah, so then we'll pre-tint the windows, meaning on the lot we've already, the front two windows usually.
Yeah.
We go ahead and tint.
Because we know people want stuff now, right? In the instant world, and so we don't want you to have to wait, so we'll tint the windows. But how is that not profitable if we don't pay attention?
If we don't communicate, and we have this sticker called an addendum that shows anything that we've added onto the vehicle that's above and beyond the MSRP.
Yeah.
If we have not put that addendum on the vehicle and we're selling it, the salesperson and the manager is working from the price that doesn't include the window tint.
Yeah, and we are 1,000% about transparency.
Yep.
We are not trying to change the price on you. We're not trying to charge you for something that you don't tangibly actually get.
Yep.
We're not charging you above and beyond for this and that. So if that's not properly communicated, we tint the windows. Then we put the addendum on to say, hey, here's what we did, because it is a value add.
Absolutely.
You did get something for it.
Oh, yeah.
And if we didn't reflect the online price in a timely manner, and the manager doesn't know when they work up the deal or the salesperson doesn't point it out, then it costs you money.
We end up eating that. And that's what happens because of the transparency you're talking about. So if the vehicle's on the lot, not that I'm asking everybody to go look for a vehicle without an addendum that has equipment, okay? We're just trying to be transparent with you guys, is that it's happened to us before. Window tint happens, manager gets busy, they don't update the computer system, they don't get the addendum. They're like, yeah, I'll get to that as soon as I can. Meanwhile, salespeople are out there making a living selling the cars. They end up processing it through. The vehicle is, here's where it usually happens. The vehicle's in the delivery bay. The customers are in finance. The sales manager walks by and they're like, oh, crud, that has window tint.
Or even worse, like, oh my gosh, that one has bigger tires on it.
Did we add the tires in? And then we'll walk by, I'll walk by when they're disgruntled about it. And then we just kind of look at them. And they're like, I know, I didn't get the addendum on there.
Yeah, and I'm not giving you inside trader tip to try to find the way to hoodoo us.
Yeah, but that's real.
Yeah, and for 78 years we've been in business by doing what we say we're going to do. And and there's slip-ups here and there. And if it's something that's wrong with the computer system, we'll post it within the dealership.
Sure.
Hey, this is a wrong price.
And that happens.
And we've had that.
Like where the system double dips on rebates. It pulls it from the manufacturers and from us, out of our control.
Yeah.
But then we're being transparent as soon as you get there.
As soon as you get there, like we had some Mavericks that came in 2 weeks ago, and there was a system issue with CDK and Viato talking, and they were like $5,000 below what they should be, and that was not because we were trying to bait and switch. And so then that was something that we said, hey, within Slack, hey, this was a wrong pricing, here's what it includes, and it's posted within our dealership. But then, like, if we've added something to it and we haven't properly gone through it, we're like, that's nobody's fault except yours.
No different in service. If we we dive into something and we gave an estimate to a customer, you got to realize that we're making our best educated professional estimate.
Yeah.
But we could get in there to the motor and it needs something else that the computer didn't read or we couldn't see that was broke. If we don't call the customer right then and say, hey, here's what we found, here's our options, and we wait and just go over it with them when they get the bill, that's not effective communication.
No, and that never ends. That's never good customer experience.
We end up eating that, which then hurts expense-wise because we didn't have good communication.
So it takes away from profitability.
So
you could communicate well. You could use the tools that you have. Hey, Terry, this is Shelby. Hey, well, I'll let you know we did get the cylinder heads off your car. It looks like actually there's some scoring on the cylinder walls. So we've got options. Here's what we can do. We can rehone this block, and I think that we can salvage it. That's going to be $3,800, or we can get a short block. It's going to be X. Which way would you like to proceed? And so you're just communicating up front. Like, no one likes that, right? But it is what it is, right? We didn't create the car, and we didn't maintain the car. We're just helping you service or buy the car. But if you just wait and just like, he told me to fix it, and you just run up a $13,000 bill, that's not good communication.
It's not good communication. It will not help profitability today, and especially not in the future, because they'll remember that.
Yeah, your word of mouth or your reputation. And so as much as you think the car dealers try to lie, steal, and cheat from you, and maybe somebody does, I promise you we don't. And we work extremely hard to make sure that you're communicated to at the highest level. And we saw that when Bronco came out. It's funny, we talked about driving the Bronco. In 2020, they released the Bronco to be pre-ordered, and we got so much heat that people waited a year, 2 or 3 years to get their Bronco, and they said, hey, you guys have not communicated enough. Well, we hadn't heard from Ford. We had never seen a Bronco since 96, you know, and so we didn't know their process and how it all would flow, and so we could keep communicating like, hey, it's Shelby.
Yeah.
We don't know anything about your Bronco. It hasn't been scheduled. They haven't say a start to production date. And so we saw that. It was like, oh, my gosh. So we created Bronco bundles and was like, hey, let's send these out to the customers. Like, hey, we don't know when it's going to be scheduled, but in the meantime, here's some swag for you. Here's a hat, a coffee mug, a shirt. So just trying to win in a tough situation.
That's a great point, and we're running a little bit out of time, but I do want to hit on that. Shelby brings up a point on how to communicate when you don't even know what the answer or what the status or what the update is.
We get a lot of that.
We do. And in the business, we could throw our hands up and say, well, it's the manufacturer's fault, which it is their fault for not communicating with us. But we can't just say, hey, it was their fault. We would have called you if we knew anything. We can still call and communicate.
Yeah.
And be like, hey, we're in constant contact with the manufacturers. They don't have any updates, but I do want to let you know we're still here for you.
Yeah.
I'll try to answer any other additional questions, and I'll keep you updated.
Yeah, like a recall, like an advanced notice recall. Hey, this is an issue, but we don't have a fix.
Correct.
You know, and so just proper communication of like, hey, I'm sorry, there's an issue. We don't have the part. It's not available, but I put you at the top of the list.
That's right. All right, let's get into frequently asked questions this week. This one talks about us being as leaders in the business.
Okay.
So I'll take the first one. It says, what is something that you have to force yourself to do as a leader in business? And myself, I would say I have to force myself to continue to listen and to go find the root cause of the issue. And what I mean by that is if something's not going right in a department, before I just react and say, here's the answer, to pause, go down to talk to some of the people on the line and see what they're saying, and not just necessarily take my manager's word for it, and gather my information to slow down, which takes more time, and then meet back with that manager to figure out what we're going to do going forward.
That's really good, and it shows that you care. Because many times you generally know the problem, you know the solution, and you want to say, hey, why'd you do this? Or you could just say, like, hey, share with me your process through this. So that's so good. All right, so my question is, what is the hardest thing that you have to face as a leader in business? And we've talked about this, and it's I guess it's proper that this week is about communication, and it's getting the team to communicate as if they were the person on the other side.
You bet.
That's one of the trickiest things is to get them to care like they were on the other side. And our team does a pretty good job of that. But if they were the consumer on the other side of the table or on the other side of the desk, would they be satisfactory with the communication level that they were getting? And so that's a tricky thing. And our team does a decent job at that. And we talk about it constantly. But that's in every single manager meeting every morning. It's like, hey, go love on somebody.
Yes.
That's what I always say. Go love on somebody and treat somebody how you want to be treated. And please communicate because it's so important.
And you've got to do it all the time. It's not a set and forget it. It's constant.
There
every
ain't
day.
one thing. There's not a computer system. There's not an AI. There's not a process in our business that we've been able to click go and back away from.
No, it's whether it's the culture or the communication or the attitude or the expectations, you have to, and that's what managers and leaders do is every single day you have to come up with something new. You just got to hold effective and keep their mind. All right, so as we wrap it up this week, a couple takeaways today. What's one of the big takeaways you want to remind the audience about?
You're not communicating near as much as you think you are. So when you think you've got it handled, circle back around, and chances are you could communicate more.
Mine would be when you get ready to communicate and you're releasing a new process or a new procedure, make sure you have your core group on the same team as you, because that meeting after the meeting will happen.
Yeah.
It's not if, it will happen. And if you got your core group, then your communication became a whole lot more effective. Hey, don't forget to check us out on lewissuperstore.com for all the year-end savings. And as we talk about in this month of December, Shelby, we've got over 500 vehicles that qualify for that Section 179 accelerated depreciation.
Where you get to write it off.
You get to write it off on all new and used vehicles. It doesn't matter if you finance it or you pay cash. So all the business owners out there that are listening, we've got ways for you to save in your taxes, come reach out to us, see any of our team members. We'll help you get into a new ride and save some taxes this year. And as always, follow us on Crossroad Conversations, and make sure you subscribe there.
See you soon. Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to give it a like, share it with your friends and family, even visit our website, send us the questions about what you want to know, what you want to hear, tell us about the automotive industry, family business in general. Who do you want to hear from? Send them our way, and we'll do our best to answer any questions you have, but make sure you tune in next time where we bring in another guest and we talk more about the automotive industry and all the great things going on within our business.